So we've just finished the red hot chili pupa, which is a nice red based fly, red colored, and I'm going to do that again here, sticking with the red theme at least for these first two flies today. And this one is just going to be a bloodworm. I'm going to just start out. I've got a size 16 kind of scud hook here in my vise. I'm using a red nano silk here. I'm not too worried about building up a lot of bulk, but I do want this to be really, really red. This is a really straightforward fly, and what I'll tell you is that there have been a time or two that I've put this one on the end of my tippet, and just it was just killing them, especially in the winter and the early spring months. So all I'm doing here is trying to lay down a nice bed of thread here that is redder in color. My hook is a nickel color, so it's pretty dark, and it's going to cover up a little bit of that. It'll be harder for that red to show through, and I really want this to pop red. Going to use microtubing just like I did with the red hot chili pupa. What I'll do with my microtubing is I'm going to actually take a flame, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of let it melt the very end here. So a couple of things that you might notice with this pattern. One, as I start out, I'm going to go ahead and have my hook tipped a little bit forward, have that eye dip down a little bit. And that's because I want to go fairly deep around the bend of my hook here. And it's much easier to do if I go ahead and throw that on that kind of an angle. We're going to go ahead and take that thread fairly deep down here. And then I've got my piece of microtubing that I've kind of melted the end on, and we're going to try to catch that end here. Kind of like that. I'll go ahead and secure that, moving upwards a little bit. Not interested in building any bulk at all in this pattern. I will turn my vise a little bit to the side. That just allows me to kind of see more clearly how far down around the bend of the hook I am getting. And again, like I said, I want to go fairly deep, and that's pretty deep. I'm going to go ahead and take this back up towards the eye. Again, like I said, not building up much bulk at all. And this is nano silk, so it's not going to build up much bulk anyway. And I'm not too worried about that sliding off the front there. Now all we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start wrapping this microtubing up. Taking touching turns. I'm pulling it a little bit tight as I start, and I'll relax it a little bit as I move up this pattern here. I'm going to really try to avoid the hook point there too, because you know, tying materials and hook points usually not a good combination, especially when you're pulling on it and stretching it. It'll just break right. It'll cut right through there. I'm just going to work my way patiently right up to behind the eye. And you can see as we relax that tubing just a little bit with each progressing wrap that that ribbing becomes a little bit more pronounced as we move up here behind the eye. So that's about as far as I want to take this one. I'm going to go ahead and take my thread and throw it over the top here. Make sure that I secure this material down pretty good. So I just take a couple of thread wraps there. I'm going to take a couple thread wraps behind the eye and maybe a couple more behind here. From there, I can go ahead and we can go ahead and clip this off and stretch that out a little bit. I'm going to grab my whip finisher, and we're going to transition to black thread just for a little tiny bit of a head. So I don't need to build up any bulk here. All I'm doing is securing my red nano silk before I cut it loose. Got that nice tight red body there for the bloodworm look. I'm going to transition now to some black nano silk, and this time I'm using nano silk not because I'm worried about bulk, but I really like that it ends up laying down and looking a little bit more silky than some of the other threads that you might use. So I'm just going to take a few thread wraps back, securing this black thread. And I'll go ahead and turn my vise even more and clip this off as close as I can. And right here is a point in time where you might want to reposition your hook in the vise. And so I'm just going to release my vise lever here, keeping a hold of the hook in my hand while I pivot that hook upwards. And then I'm going to re-clamp it down. So never hesitate to do that, to kind of move your hook around while you're in the process of tying your fly. The first angle was great to get clear down here around the bend of this hook, clear down to here, and now I'm pivoting it up because I want to work on the head and I don't want my thread to be sliding off the front. So you can always just really quickly and easily, just like I did there, reposition your hook in the vise. And I'm not going to, like I said before, I'm not going to build a very pronounced head here, just a little bit. We're going to use some UV on it to just kind of not just lock the thread in place, but also to get a nice transition to that red microtubing. I'm just going to take a couple of thread wraps here, not too worried about security again, because I'm going to put UV resin on this, so it's going to be pretty bulletproof. So I've got my UV resin, got my trusty sewing pen. That's my weapon of choice when I'm applying UV. And put just a tiny little bit, kind of coat this black thread here all the way around. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of turn my vise as I work on applying this resin. Just a tiniest little bit more. And then I'm going to just let it slide a little bit down into those pieces of microtubing. I'm not trying to coat the microtubing in the UV, but I want a nice smooth transition there. So with my UV kind of where I wanted it, I'm going to go ahead and hit it with my torch, my UV flashlight. It's going to cure it. So here we are with our finished bloodworm pattern, very easy to tie. You only need a couple of materials really, aside from your hook. A couple of colors of thread and some red microtubing. Maybe use some UV resin, or you can use some high gloss varnish on it if you'd like as well. But I'll tell you what, I put this on the end of my leader, and especially in the winter months, early spring months, this is going to catch fish. I've done really well with it, so give it a shot.